60% of the GDP is driven by consumer expenditure.
The report says this year Apple is going to take over HUL, Hindustan Unilever, in terms of revenue.
If you're planning to build a company in this country, आपको ये study करना ही पड़ेगा.
They built a dating app where you can chat and voice chat. I mean, there are a lot of brands. There are a lot of brands who are stuck at a certain revenue from ages. And they think maybe their marketing is wrong, maybe the sale is wrong. No.
I'm very interested in knowing who are these people who are actually getting the credit cards. अगर इतना penetration नहीं था 10 साल पहले, तो ऐसा क्या हुआ कि these people started buying credit cards again massively, right?
You see that a lot of cricket broadcasting or sports broadcasting was used to be in English. Right? There is no scope for Hindi commentary, or if it was there, then it was very limited.
Hey friends, I'm back with my co-founder Nitan, and today we are discussing Indus Valley Report. So this is exciting because जब हमने business शुरू किया था 2014 में, बहुत सारे data points जो आते थे, it was either from US or Europe. बहुत सारे founders से मैं मिला हूँ जो वहाँ का data discuss करते हैं marketing front पे, business front पे, which is practically not relevant for all of us. Right? मेरे ख्याल से सबने कहीं ना कहीं गलतियाँ की होंगी वहाँ का data set देख के. But finally we have something which we can call our own. मतलब this Indus Valley Report talks about India as a market, India as an economy, and India as something where everyone has certain stake. Or this is going to be relevant for everyone who is planning to be a part of startup ecosystem, everyone who is a founder, everyone who is planning to start a new company. You are a marketer in a startup company, and I think that's why this report is extremely relevant, right? So there is something that I would like to start with, which is the first section of it. It's called GDP, right?
Right.
And Nitin, is there specific that you want to discuss about that? Any relevant data point that you feel was extremely valuable for everyone in the audience?
Right. So before we jump onto that, I just want to add one more point that you mentioned. It's relevant for startups. It's relevant for marketing professionals. But I believe it's also relevant for every established business as well, because it says a lot about India. So anybody who has vested interest in India in any sense, it's business, it's job, or you're doing anything in India, then this report is for you. Right? It's that good.
हाँ, वैसे they also talk about IPO in the later sections,
Yes,
right?
yes.
They are also comparing the big public companies against startups and how they are acquiring the new age digital brands.
Right.
So yes, in a sense, that's correct. Thanks for, I think, pointing that out.
Right. So I guess we can start discussing about GDP, because that's where the report starts from. And one thing that struck me was the share of consumption in India's GDP. So if we compare India's GDP to our counterparts, maybe China or US, the share of consumption is around 60%. The contribution is huge as comparison to China or any other country, because most of them are either into 20-30% range. So I mean, we can start from that, and then also I want to discuss that how this consumption trend evolves, where we are, what we are consuming in what form, and who those actually consumers are. Where do they live? What do they do? And what do they consume?
Right. I think ये data point मैंने भी notice किया था. So 60% of the GDP is driven by consumer expenditure, right? And private consumption, which was very different from China. I think China, I may be wrong, it may be around 38% or 40%, around that number, right? But the difference is stark, right?
Right.
So the point is, if you're planning to build a company in this country, आपको ये study करना ही पड़ेगा. You need to understand where this consumption is coming from, right? And I think the report also talks about that a lot by segregating the whole India as a consumer into India 1, India 2, and India 3. Right? And that's something I would like to talk about.
Right. So I think, I mean, it's not new for India. So even the report says that back in 2005, right, 18 years back, we were spending around 58%. The share of contribution in GDP was around 58%. And then in 2016, it was around 61%. So I would say that India, on an average, the share of consumption was around 60% or so.
So it has always been like this?
Yes, at least for the last 18 years. Wow. That's what the report says. So it has been there. The only thing we now need to discuss is that do we see a pattern in consumption where what we are consuming now, right, and in what form, right? So I think that becomes more important. And few things like we have to see that what kind of growth we have seen there. So in one particular section, I have noticed that report says that back in 2018 we had, or 2017 we have somewhere around 47 million credit card users. Right now it's 95 million. So the growth is more than double. Right? So Indian consumers are spending, or maybe taking credit cards to spend on something else.
That's correct.
So I guess that's what intrigues me, and I guess that's what I'm more interested in, that how they are spending and what they are spending upon.
Right, and I think that's where the discussion of India 1, 2, and 3 becomes very important.
Very important.
Because if you notice, this credit card, I'm very interested in knowing who are these people who are actually getting the credit cards. अगर इतना penetration नहीं था 10 साल पहले, तो ऐसा क्या हुआ कि these people started buying credit cards again massively, right? और हम देख भी रहे हैं P2P lending भी बढ़ा, and report also talks about that, right? But I want to step back a little and discuss this part, India 1, 2, 3 again and again. Kishore Piani की भी commentary उसमें mentioned है, right? But India 1, 2, 3 के according आप अगर India को divide करो, and I would want to point is India 1 is according to the report people who have like lot of discretionary income to spend, and I think they categorize it as people who have over $15,000 as per capita income, right? And they say somewhere around 30 million this audience size is. And the next is the India 2, where the audience size is around 70 million. But the point is, यहाँ पर जो आपका GDP है, that becomes somewhere around $3,000. So the difference is stark, like 15,000 say directly you're coming back to 3,000 per capita. And India 3 is where the report says any startup cannot build their market. Right, because वहाँ पे जो per capita income है, that is around $1,000. Right. So with that in perspective, right? So how do you see that why startups are, and again I'm bringing this one because आपको हर एक market के लिए build भी अलग तरीके से करना है, right? आपको हर एक market के लिए scaling भी अलग तरीके से plan करनी है. Right. So I want to ask specifically, how do you read this? How do you read this in terms of where startups, when they try to build for India 1, right? Why do they struggle when they're trying to move to India 2 market?
Right. So if we look at India 1, I would say there are 30 million households, and the report says there are somewhere around 120 million people in general. Right? So around 12 crores. But if I see that the same report also says that only 8% of India have a car.
Yes.
The ownership.
Yes, they do.
Right?
Yes.
Right. So that's somewhere around, again, 8 crores to 10 crores. Right? So in general, 10 crore comes to India 1, which has around 12 lakh rupees in Indian rupee term, 12 lakh rupees per annum as a income per capita. Now the second part, where the income drops to $3,000, or you can say 2.5 lakh rupees. Right? So that size is much bigger than what we call India 1. So India 1 was around 10 CR, 10 crore people, 10 crore Indians in India 1, and then we have around 30 crores Indians in India 2. So when we say that somebody has an income of 12 lakh and the same citizen has an income of 2.5 lakh, the spending pattern change dramatically. So for example, India 2, I would say, is aspirational. They want to buy products, but they do not have a luxury of throwing their money away on luxuries, or you can say on things like which do not add much value to their lifestyles. So report says that they are more interested in either entertainment like OTT, or you can say they are more interested in edtech startups. Basically, they want to improve themselves or spend on something that can actually help them understand or actually help them grow in their career. So that is India 2 for us. And I guess that's why you can see startups like Upgrad or startups like Beat&X or most of other edtech startups, Growth School, they are actually targeted for India 2. Because that class is aspirational, that class wants to grow and they want to spend on themselves. So that is India 2 for me. Mostly edtech and entertainment, I would say. And then we have India 1. they are spending upon things like beauty, the report says.
Yes.
Right. So I guess that's the reason Nika got its IPO, and they were able to build a business around it, because that's where the India one likes to spend their money on. So India one, I would say that's the 10 crore people, every startup after it. But the real juice, the real mass that we have in India, that is in India too. And we have to see that how other entertainment players or edtech players or fintech players use that market.
So that's an interesting point. The consumption patterns across all these three categories, right? And one thing that I noticed in the report which says is कि necessities dominates India's consumption patterns, right? मुझे लगता है इसकी डाटा की जरूरत नहीं है, जो थोड़ा भी इंडिया में मतलब रहा है deeper, they understand this,
right?
But one thing that is report is silent about is ये necessities has क्या, because if you will go into that section, they say necessities including food,
right?
Which I also find funny because food is the necessity, right? So the report is silent on that part. So I also want to know what according to you these necessities actually are, because government says something about it, report is silent about it. And for instance, diaper can be a necessity. Is it a necessity? Is it not a necessity, right? Something like eating out, is it a necessity or not? Broadband, is it a necessity or not? So report is kind of silent about it. What do you think are necessities in general, or report may be pointing to?
I think I mean, I'm not going to comment on how the government define necessity, because that's a different ball game altogether.
Yes.
But as far as this report is concerned, this report is majorly considering everything which is that FMCG players are producing or mass consumption. They are considering it as necessity. So for to give an example, so reports compare V-Mart versus Zara. How much sale has grown in V-Mart versus Zara? So V-Mart grows about 14%, and Zara's growth was 18% in the same period.
That's correct. That's correct.
Right. So I think the report tries to say that V-Mart is a kind of necessity, and Zara is a luxury. Right.
Correct.
And the same report says Hero growth was 6%. Hero motorcycles, right? And then
Royal
Enfield was the growth was around 16%. Right. So the report looks at it as Hero as a necessity, because you have to have a bike to commute, right? Yeah. To go from point A to point B. But on the same side, necessity owning a bullet, owning or something like Super Meteor. So that becomes a luxury.
Yes, so commute I think is one part of necessity, and bikes in general India में functional value के लिए ही बनती थी, and that's probably the report is also pointing to. But there is one catch here, right? So necessity पे भी how much you can spend, right? Right. And what is their expenses? I would like कि वो report में होता, but I don't think कि वो है. And if you look at certain data points in this, it's very interesting. So उन्होंने दो parts में divide किया है consumption pattern को. So one is discretionary and the other is grocery. Right. So मेरा assumption है कि grocery जो part है, that is a necessity part, right? But that's very different. Like India में 25% discretionary income है, 75% is on groceries. And if you look at in China, that's very different. That's like 60-40. Right. 60 for discretionary and 40 for groceries or necessity. US में it is 70-30, right? So India में when you have just 25 to as a discretionary income, right? 25% of your whole income is discretionary. Where you would like to spend it, right? बहुत ही कम avenues बनते हैं. You can either go and buy clothes, you can go and book travel, and you can go you can dine out, right? Right. And I think that's why the report also says that there are a lot of categories where India is under consuming. Right.
And I also want to highlight one more point here. It's not just about the percentage. It's also about what is the percentage is taken from. So, for example,
explain please.
I mean, $10,000, 25% is $2,500, right? But $1,000, 25% is $250.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's not just about the percentage of discretionary income. It's also about the total sum value of where you are calculating that percentage from.
So basically, you're saying that 25% is a generic term which the report is using, but it's not dividing across the way it talks about India,
India
1,
one, India two,
India
yes.
3, right?
Right.
So India 1 के लिए 25 discretionary is something else. वहाँ पे हो सकता है this is average. It is probably 50%, 60%.
Right.
And if I go to bottom, शायद वहाँ पे 25 या even if I take the average, it would be even lesser or lower.
Right. So I mean, to put it more in context, so in India 1, the income was 12 lakh rupees. Right. And let's say that if the average is 25, so we can assume that maybe it's at India 1, so they have more discretionary income, right? So if we can say it is as 30 to 40%. If we take 40%, then they have 3 lakh rupees as discretionary income, right? But in India 2, where we can assume it as 20%, so 2.5 lakh rupees per capita to 20%, so that becomes 50,000 rupees.
That's correct.
Right.
That's
so what you can buy in 50,000 rupees per year? That amount is too small, right? If you decided to buy a bike, as the report discussed,
Right.
you decided to buy a Royal Enfield instead of a Hero, then I guess you are settled for, I guess, 2 to 3 years. You cannot buy anything else.
Or maybe if there is a health expenses, right? Well, that alone takes away a lot of discretionary income in many families. So that's very interesting. And the next thing, the one part I would also like to point out is report what छोटी सी line out, but they say that India 2 is where the growth really lies. So India 1 में आप market build करते हो. So if you look at all the airline companies, I think 1% of the Indians travel abroad. Credit card की penetration भी they said again is again 30 million के आसपास है. Similarly, they also said about the other household income may, if you are spending on, let's say, cars, that is also around that 8% you mentioned, right? So every audience comes around to be 30-40 million, right? So where do you expand? So naturally you expand to India 2, right? But India 2 के बारे में उन्होंने बहुत छोटी सी line की, which is extremely relevant, कि these people are heavy buyers but reluctant payers, right?
I mean, elaborate a bit.
हाँ, so मतलब point is कि these people are ready to splurge money on, let's say, edtech. These people are eating out. These people are also going out watching movies, right? Which probably India 3 is not doing. So naturally, this is where the growth lies, right? But what I really want to understand, if they are reluctant payers and they are still spending, they are definitely spending in certain categories,
right?
They are not
very
selective categories, right? And this audience, they say, is probably in the range of 20 to 40, right? So how do I identify these categories? I think growth शायद हर category में भी नहीं है. You have to identify these categories where India 2 is spending and then probably try to build companies there. And if you're trying to market, you have to also understand how these people are going to certain places or what their buying behavior is like.
So my if I have to approach it, right, I look India 2 as a aspirational class. So even the report termed them as aspirational.
That's correct.
So either they are spending on necessity, the must have, or they are spending something that elevates their social status. Right. So to put it more in context, the report says this year Apple is going to take over HUL, Hindustan Unilever, in terms of revenue. And that is huge. That is huge.
Right.
Because in India, HUL is practically make everything we consume on daily basis.
So it's a necessity. It's great necessity related products.
Right. But if Apple is going to overtake them, then it also says that, and we can look around ourselves. A lot of India 2 is also buying their products, even if they don't have a discretionary income, as we discussed earlier.
Correct.
Right? But it's a very aspirational product. It helps them elevate their social status. So either you operate in necessity, then you can sell to India 2. That is first category. Second, can you help them improve their income at tech, or help them laugh, entertainment?
That's correct.
Then the third category comes in, and that is, can you make them feel that their social status has been improved? Can you do that? So I guess these are the three categories that can be or may be able to sell to India 2. And then that's, I guess, 30 crore people, a lot of people.
That's interesting. और मुझे ये भी लगता है कि इनका digital behavior pattern is also very different. Right. So for instance, मुझे नहीं लगता कि they are all using similar kind of social media channels. शायद इंडिया 3 को स्नैपचैट के बारे में पता भी नहीं है,
राइट,
और शायद पता है तो वो यूज भी नहीं करेंगे.
हम्म.
सो द पॉइंट आई एम ट्राइंग टू मेक इज फ्रॉम मार्केटर्स पर्सपेक्टिव कि ये जो 3 ऑडियंसेस हैं, इनका सिर्फ कंजम्पशन पैटर्न ही डिफरेंट नहीं है, इनका डिजिटल बिहेवियर पैटर्न इज आल्सो वेरी डिफरेंट. So some of them are probably, so yeah, report also talks about this. They says that कि जैसे WhatsApp है, its penetration is across all of these categories. Similarly, India 2 के लिए एक अलग social channel है जो India शायद 3 नहीं use कर रहा, but there is certain digital platforms जो शायद India 1 use कर रहा है और India 2 3 नहीं use कर रहा at all.
Right.
और वो it's not necessarily has to be social platforms. If you look at the dating apps. Right. So उन्होंने एक specific part भी बोला कि Tinder for India will be very different from the Tinder that is built globally.
Right.
Right. और इसका एक example मुझे बहुत अच्छा दिया था मेरे एक client ने who was building a dating app at one point of time. She said कि dating के लिए you need to have families जहाँ पे आप शायद अकेले रह रहे हो. There are very few individuals in India who are staying alone.
Right.
Right. And who have probably time, energy, money, all of them to actually go out and date. Right? So point I'm trying to make is कि ये जो India 1 है, ये बहुत ही अलग क्लास के डिजिटल प्रोडक्ट्स भी यूज कर रहा है. ये लोग शायद स्नैपचैट पे हैं, ये लोग शायद उस प्लेटफॉर्म्स पे जहाँ पर हम लोग ट्रेडिशनली टारगेट भी नहीं करते हैं.
राइट,
राइट. जैसे इंडिया 3 के लिए भी जैसे एग्जांपल है, आई थिंक MX, टकाटक और शेयरचैट. A lot of people also said that कि these platforms are designed to reach out to India 2 and India 3.
Right.
Right. So I feel this report is very relevant for marketers in the sense it also tells you if you're trying to reach a certain segment of audience, where do you need to be.
Right. And I think, I mean, you're absolutely right about it. And you mentioned dating apps, right? So there is one section I want to quote here. So India 1 is on Tinder, on Bumble, right? So they do understand it and it makes sense for them for different reasons.
Right.
But for India 2, Tinder or Bumble, right, they are not able to penetrate yet. But then there is one startup called Friend, right? They are on 15 million ARR and majority of their customers are from India 2. So, I mean, their business model is completely different. So their founder says that if you make an account on Bumble from a tier 3 city, right, next day your mom knows about it, that you are on Bumble. Because the town is so small, right? Everyone knows everybody.
That's true.
Right? They built a dating app called Friend, where you can chat and voice chat with different layers of anonymity or different layers of interaction.
But इसकी profile में क्या आपको photos वगैरह सब दिखते थे?
I haven't used it.
Okay. All right.
So I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is the business model is different. You don't have to pay a subscription fee upfront. You can go on it. You can set a testing message, right? You can get few tokens to send some messages per day. If you want to send more messages or more voice notes, you can purchase that. So the transaction amount becomes very small. And that's how they're able to crack India 2. And that's what I guess we discussed in the last podcast as well. That for India 2 or India 3, the business models need to change. The product offerings need to change. You cannot take the same product from India 1 and the same product, business model from India 1 and implement out in India 2. It will not work. And Friend is a very, very good example. It's profitable, by the way. 15 million ARR, profitable, and serving India 2.
Wow.
How amazing is that?
Fantastic. मुझे नहीं पता इसके बारे में इससे
Right.
पहले.
And I guess the second example we can see is UPI. Right? The UPI came, now you can send 100 rupees, 50 rupees, 250 rupees to anybody you want to sell in seconds.
Correct.
That wasn't possible when we were relying on internet banking completely. The kind of growth we have seen on digital space just because of UPI is tremendous. Because it taps into India too. The transaction amount is very small. Very convenient and very small. So that is, I guess, the same is true for Friend, the dating app, and the same is true for UPI. The transaction amount is small. And if I go even further, if I have to take this conversation even one step ahead, I'll talk about HUL. Because, I mean, if you see, they have similar products in the same category. PNG. Why do they launch two surf for India, right? One is Tide and another one is
True Surf is also a good example here.
right? So why would they do that?
True.
Because India 1 can consume up to a certain level. For India 2, maybe Tide is needed.
इससे मुझे एक और अच्छी चीज एग्जांपल आ रही जो हमने शायद पहले पॉडकास्ट में डिस्कस की थी, which was around when you said कि the product is great, amazing, but the price point has to be spot on for that
Right.
product, right?
Exactly.
So I think these companies also are sitting on the data points that they know कि how much I can increase the price of the product by increasing, of course, the quality, and then probably tap a market which is not penetrable right now.
Right.
So I think that's a very good example.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, as I said, that if you can sell Ariel, right, you have to launch a Tide because the market is for both. You cannot sell Ariel to everybody.
बट इससे एक और चीज समझ आती है, मतलब आई थिंक ये बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग डिस्कशन है कि क्या इंडिया 1 और इंडिया 2 के लिए मैं मतलब सेम प्रोडक्ट से शायद स्केल ही नहीं कर सकता, शायद मुझे ऑफरिंग एकदम टोटली व्हिच यू आर ट्राइंग टू पॉइंट आउट, राइट, कि एकदम डिफरेंट ही रखना पड़े,
right? And not about the offering, I would say positioning. The price and position has to be different.
Correct.
Right. I mean, there are a lot of brands. There are a lot of brands who are stuck at a certain revenue from ages, and they think maybe their marketing is wrong, maybe the sale is wrong. No, positioning is wrong because you have kind of milked your way through India 1. Now, if you want to go to India 2, you have to change your offering a bit. You cannot offer the same goods.
Interesting.
Right. For example, Apple may not be sellable to India 2 bottom or India 3. Right. I mean, they don't want to. Right now, it doesn't look like they want to. Right. But if they can, they won't be able to. It's as simple as that.
Correct. And this brings me to another part of the report, which segregates this even India 2 into India 2.1 and 2.2. They quote Mithun Madhusudan, and he says that दोनों market different है, and probably your growth is not going to come from India 2 in general, but India 2.1.
Right.
Now, how do he differentiate it? So he differentiated by saying that India 2.1 is people who speak regional languages, and specifically says that one categorization they have watched the show Friends, right? और ये लोग discretionary income इनके पास है, plus most importantly they are digital savvy,
right?
Because if you want to reach out to them with a new offering and product, right, you want these person to be digital savvy in one way or the other. However, digital or let's say India 2.2, it's very different, right? So ये old है, almost similar income है, but they are not digital savvy, right?
Right.
So if I just want to target India 2.1 of this whole 70 million India 2, right? How do I identify these people? How do I identify people, and how do I grow with these set of companies?
I guess it's a challenge for every marketer out there. Right? But one example that comes to my mind is, or the companies are also trying to tap them out, is the broadcasting channels. So if we go back to our childhood, you will see that a lot of cricket broadcasting or sports broadcasting was used to be in English, right? There is no scope for Hindi commentary, or if it was there, then it was very limited.
अगर हिंदी थी भी तो मेरे ख्याल से गुजराती, पंजाबी, भोजपुरी, कन्नड़ा, मलयालम नहीं थे.
Right. I mean, ये तो लगी गेम होगी, right? Even Hindi was very limited.
Correct.
Right. But few years back, Star has launched a different channel for Hindi commentary.
Yeah.
Now you can watch WWE in India in Hindi.
Yeah, that's so amazing.
Right.
Correct.
So even the global channels with the global sports trying to tap to India market, they are offering their commentary or offering their entertainment or services in Hindi, because 2.1 as India, they are into regional languages. Right. And similarly, if you're watching IPL, they are going regional altogether in every Haryanvi, even Bhojpuri, Tamil, Telugu, every language commentary is available on for IPL. So I guess that's what broadcasters are trying to do, to tap to these people who are to India 2.1, and I guess as per my estimates, they may be somewhere around 15 crores to 20 crores people. That's a lot of Indians to target. And even when we talk to our clients, when we talk to our needs, we also suggest that okay, go regional,
That's correct.
use regional language, use maybe English, because that's where the scale is. You cannot scale if you keep yourself sophisticated and limited to India one.
That's correct.
Because as we discussed, that audience is 8 to 10 crores, and another thing, they have a lot of options, a plethora of options, because every startup, every brands want to sell to those 10 crore people, right?
Correct.
And I guess that is the reason, if I see the lot of new edtech brands, they are able to scale because they have gone regional. They are trying to tap to India 2 market, or India 2.1 in our case.
India 2.1, yes. And I think India 2.1, I would just use one parameter, that they are digital savvy.
Yes.
I think उनको आप शायद print media से नहीं target कर सकते, उनको आप radio से नहीं target कर सकते. They are digital savvy. They are consistently scrolling their Instagram feeds. They are probably sending text on Snapchat, or they are just watching a YouTube video. So this audience is, I think, very different. I think this report also enlightened me as a marketer on certain levels. I think it's going to help me out when I am building new things for our company, right? In this case, right? So any other aspect of the report, Nitin, that you find interesting and would like to discuss?
I think we will also discuss the funding scenario in India.
Yes. Anything specific?
So, the report talks a lot about funding, how the funding has been in the last couple of years, and we have seen the funding kind of dried up in the last year or so. So the report tried to talk about it, that where the gap is or what the actual numbers are. So I guess we should talk about that as well.
But don't you think that funding patterns across the globe has been similar? I mean, even if I keep the report aside, or do you think report has any specific insight on that?
So I think there is a specific topic that report touched upon, and that was that India's startup funding has come down to around 1/4 from 2021 levels, right? So it's 25% of what 2021 where we are as a country, right? But if we compare the same period from 21 to 2023, so we could see that other countries like UK, US, China, their downfall was just around 50% or so. So the drop in Indian funding was very rapid as we compare to US or UK or maybe even China. So I guess that needs to be addressed, and that also tells a lot about Indian startup ecosystem, and also a kind of what lies ahead in terms of funding in India.
Correct. So at least for this year, 2024, I don't see a lot of startups getting funding. I mean, we know data from a lot of people that we talk to. But one thing that I'm confident about is, even with the limited funding that there is, the narrative to build profitability has come up. Everyone that I talk to, I'm sure you talk to, everyone is talking about how to make business profitable. I think this could have been done a few years back. But there are still certain segments which will be challenged, or which will face great trouble in scaling the company from here on. And it may not be like, so for instance, services company, मुझे लगता है कि they get profitable as compared to other companies faster. People-led business, you can maintain margins, right? But अगर आपको एक बार inventory build करनी है, और आपका cash flow आपका compromise होता है, because there is a period during which the cash actually comes into the account. So certain businesses need funding, at least debt funding, right? तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि those segments will definitely suffer. So do you think that this funding drying up, it will be challenging certain segments, and if it will be, what those specific segments are going to be according to you?
Right. So before I come to that, I just want to highlight one more thing in the report. So although the report says about the funding is drying up, right? But there is also a very interesting point, and I guess that's not been discussed even in the traditional media we consume. So in 2017 or 18, the seed check was around 2 CR.
2017-18,
right? But in 2023, that seed funding check goes up to 7 CR.
Almost 3.5 times,
right? So, I mean, companies or seed funding companies in general, they have been selective, but the check size has been increased. Right? So that is one thing I just want to let it out.
But even so hold that thought. So do you think is it because of the inflation, or is it just that building company has become costlier?
It's becoming costlier, and I guess as a marketer we know that.
Yes, of
CPMs
course.
have gone through the roof, right?
Right. हाँ मतलब अगर 50% का भी इंक्रीज है तो एक्विजिशन में आपको उतना खर्चा करना ही पड़ेगा.
Right. So I guess that is there. But I would say that you mentioned that maybe the ecosystem will suffer because of funding.
Yes, certain specific industries, I feel, not every.
I don't think that will be the case. I think companies who are built earlier, maybe we called Oziva, maybe Just House, maybe Nika, right, Flipkart. These were the digital first brands or digital natives, as you can call them, right? They have their turn. They were early movers and they had an advantage. They built their companies. Now the companies are not getting funding. Okay, it's fine. So newer companies will not find it easy to get funding, so it will be challenging for them. But, and that's a big but, it's an opportunity. It's a big opportunity for existing FMCG brands, for existing companies, because they have the cash, they have the capital, and they have seen what could be done if you go digital. So I guess the new wave of companies or the new brands, I would say, they will come up from these FMCG companies. They will come up from those traditional companies which are sitting on cash. So if you see the trend, Marico invested in Just Hubs, right?
Yes, I think, I don't know, they're quite majority stake, I'm not aware, but yeah, major funding.
Right. Yeah. And similarly, ITC did similar trends with HUL, with Oziva and Wellbeing Nutrition.
Yeah, ITC did Yoga Bar.
Yoga Bar, right? So these companies are slowly investing or acquiring these brands, and they have seen what kind of scale or what kind of profitability or what kind of product line can be built around it, and they have that taste. So my thoughts are, next wave of brands are coming from these traditional companies which have ample cash that they can spend on and build brands.
So not venture capital, probably not seed funders,
Yes.
but directly from. But this also tells that आपको काफी मेहनत खुद ही करनी पड़ेगी. Because if you're not getting the funding, at least to get the visibility in front of people or these big brands, you need to build product which takes investment.
Right.
You need to build that initial set of customers that again needs some cash, right? And you also need to invest in this new product research because वो आपको निकालना ही पड़ेगा. So there you are spending cash. So that basically means that even if you're starting out, you need to do all the hard work without any funding before a lot of these companies actually see you.
Right. So I mean, अगर स्वर्ग जाना है तो मरना तो पड़ेगा.
वही वाली बात है ना.
Right. So that has to be done. But one thing is for sure, that ecosystem will not suffer. And I guess that's what matters.
Correct.
Because once traditional FMCG brands were able to build companies, then I guess the private funds or the equity investors will come again. So it's a cycle. But I think the good thing is we have a couple of IPOs that are doing good. Policy Bazaar or Zomato.
I think the report
right.
mentions it as well. Yes.
Mamaearth. So I think this kind of put India back to kind of success story that yes, companies can be built here and we can go IPO. We can take exit, a decent exit. So if that is the case, then I guess funding will come back. It's a dry period. It's a tough period. It will be there for some few months, but the funding will come back.
Hopefully.
Definitely.
Hopefully. Okay. So I think the other part I want to discuss in this report, the final part is the spending on the advertising side.
Right.
So बहुत छोटा सा part है. It's the last part of the report. It's very interesting. It says that the spending on marketplace ads, right? Platforms like Amazon, platforms like Swiggy, Instamart, or Big Basket, it has become almost as high as print ads.
Right.
So print ad is, I think, 22%, and on marketplaces it is 18%. So this is the contribution of their ad spend in the total ad spends, digital ad spends, right? So which basically means that the propensity to spend on these platforms is getting higher, and I'm assuming this is growing at a way faster rate than it is growing on print platforms. What's your take on this? How do you see this?
I think that alone demands a different podcast altogether. Right? It's that good a topic. But I have seen a couple of data points here. So the first point is that digital or merchant ads, they call it, on platform ads, they call categorize that merchant ads, that Amazon ads or Swiggy ads or Nike ads. There they have built a kind of community of India 1 and India 2.1, the users we were discussing. So you are directly able to tap that out. Earlier we have to tap out them on Google or Facebook, but now you have other avenues, and they are a bit cheaper. Not by a lot margin, but bit cheaper than the traditional Google and Meta. And second thing is that if you are only operating on marketplaces, you are not selling on your own website, right? Then you have the advantage of logistics, and that's a big advantage for someone who have just started out, who doesn't have a lot of logistics, to take care of, because Amazon take care of all of them.
That's correct.
And that is the reason, if you see the numbers, their revenue from ad spend is from for Amazon, it's around 4.5% of their total GMV in India. That's a huge. And why it is huge is because ad revenue is 90% gross margin as compared to GMV. Right?
Right.
And someone like Nike, they are doing 6% of their GMV.
Wow.
So that's amazing. But as a marketer, I'm very happy because now we have more avenues to go to. Now we can take our brands to the consumers which are not be able to discover on maybe Meta or Google, right? So I think as a marketer, you have a lot of opportunities to play with. You have Amazon, you have Flipkart, you have Nike. Although like some of these platforms are in very early stages, right? Only I guess Amazon has a full-fledged self-serving platform with a lot of capabilities built in, and rest of the platforms are still catching up. But I guess 2-3 years down the line, you will see a lot of them built into full-fledged self-serving ad platforms.
But yeah, so again, my the most important part to this is for me is that how these platforms are not just like acquiring brands, or let's say acquiring other products to sell on their platforms. Like they're not operating like that. I think they are aggregating consumers.
Right.
So Amazon is acquiring a certain set of consumers, Nike is acquiring a certain set of consumers, Flipkart is acquiring certain set of consumers, similarly Big Basket, Swiggy and all of that. Now I relate this with the way India 1, India 2 and India 3 discussion. So basically this means is that every single platforms has an audience of its own.
Right.
And the way they call it in startup ecosystem, that it is actually a distribution capacity that they built. But most importantly, they have distribution capacity in a certain audience. And if I compare it with print, which we talked about initially, it also means that on print, the audience is more generic. Like I really don't know कि वो buy क्या कर रहे हैं. मुझे ये पता है कि वो मेरा अखबार पढ़ रहे हैं.
Right.
I know that they're reading this kind of stuff, but I really don't know what kind of purchasing capability they have. But when these people are on the platform, I have more data points on their purchase behavior. I can even sell ads accordingly. मुझे पता है कि मुझे अगर rice के keyword पे ad चलानी है तो how much I can charge. If I have to charge for let's say diabetic rice, उसके लिए मुझे कितना charge करना पड़ेगा.
Right.
So I think these platforms are also creating a consumer aggregation in their own distribution capacity, and I think this will be again going to grow very fast. हो सकता है अगली 2-3 reports अगर हम लोग देखें Indus Valley की, chances are this will be even higher than what we're seeing on print at right now.
Definitely, and I guess the writing is on the wall. So a lot of searches that we used to do earlier, we started from Google. But nowadays, if I have to buy something, my search starts from Amazon, or maybe Swiggy, maybe Zomato, maybe Nike. So I would say this is what I would say search traffic that was earlier on the search platforms like Google or maybe other platforms. But right now it's very targeted because they know at the end buy to yahin se karna hai. Right? So let's start from here only. Why waste time?
Correct. So I think this kind of brings us to the end part of it. But before we end this, Nitin, I want to know your opinion. Is report mein what you would like to see more? And I think if folks at Blue Ventures are watching this, I think that can be kind of a feedback.
So I think, first of all, report is a great attempt. right? It's a long report, around 130 pages report. So it's very hard to put together all those numbers. I like the part of India 123. If they have put a bit more emphasis on how big is India 2.1 and what kind of purchasing power they have, as they said about in general 21% to 25% of additional income that they can spend on not on necessity but on other things, discretionary income that they said. So that if the report would be vocal about that discretionary income on individual levels, so that would have been amazing. That would have been amazing. That is number one. Second would be the last part. They discussed a lot about ad spend and about platforms. If they would get into more of that a little bit more in detail. So they mentioned that digital ad spend is now around 1.5 times or 1.7 times of TV ad spend.
Correct.
Right. So that's amazing. But if they could have bifurcated it a bit more,
Yes.
right? So the marketer in me would be pleased.
Yes.
So
That's true.
So I guess that is another thing that I would have liked to see.
All right. So I think this brings us to the end of the podcast, and I hope this was valuable for you. We'll be back with a new episode just in a few weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you like it, share it with someone who may need it.